Okay, so what I want to do is show you how to mess around with attribute information, and I'm going to do so by an example of French provinces. This actually comes from a map that somebody in the class is working on, but since I have the data sitting here, I figured I'd show you what's going on. Alright, so I have a map of the countries in Europe, essentially. And if I turn off provinces, you can see you got France, England, Spain, Italy, Switzerland, Germany, etc. And if you turn on the provinces layer, you can see it's France, but it's the provinces of France. Provinces are roughly equivalent to states. And let's say that what I want to do is map something in particular about these provinces. Now, what I could do is kind of kludge something together here, and I could say, alright, categories, and I'll come in here and add all of the province names, and you can see there are a good number of them. And if I wanted to, like, say, group certain provinces together, let's say alphabetically, I could select the 3 A's, and I could say group values, and then change the name to provinces beginning with, starting with A, and then I could do B's, group those together, and then provinces starting with B, and go on from there. Let's say, make it real quick, let's say provinces starting with something else. And now you can see I have a 3-color map, and then these other country boundaries, I'll just make them hollow. They're background information. And if we made a quick and dirty legend here, add legend, and we'll remove countries, so we just have a legend of provinces. And we'll just go through this, and you see we have a map that is reasonable. Not that provinces and their letters are really that good or helpful, but anyway, you can kind of cut your data up that way. The problem is it's pretty labor intensive, and if all of a sudden you decided that you wanted to make a category of C's, you'd have a lot of work on your hands, because you'd have to remove this and then add values and then make sure that you added all of the C values, and then you have to go and you have to group them together, and then provinces starting with C, right? And that doesn't seem like too much, but it is a pain in the butt when you start having tons of them to do, or if every single one has to fall into a different category. So the other option is to actually edit the attribute information. Now remember, the attribute information is contained in a table, and you can actually add fields and things to this. So I'm going to show you the alternate method that takes a little more time, but in the long run is easier to deal with, and that would be we're going to actually I'm going to delete this for the time being, and we're going to actually make this map provinces starting with A, B, C, and for the heck of it, we'll add values. We'll add the rest of these and say provinces starting with something else. We'll group them all together, and then provinces starting with something else. Alright, and now we have a 4-category map, and really there's other things that we should do. We should turn this off. That gets rid of that. We should probably just say provinces here, remove this, just to pretty up the legend a little bit. And we don't need to say provinces. In provinces, maybe we say provinces is the title, and then we say French, or France. Right? Bam. So that's a reasonable legend. We'll leave it at that. So in order to start editing this, you actually want to right-click and go to Attribute Table, and we'll add a field in here. We'll call it starting. Now, there's some drawbacks here. You can only put 8 letters in the name, and you have to select what sort of data that you're adding. And we're adding text, but you could add integers, which are just numbers. Float, it'd be numbers with a decimal place, dates, etc. And you have to be careful too, because you have to tell it how many characters you're going to include, and it can go up to 255. We want to keep it small. Probably provinces starting with something else is 50 characters or less, so we'll just say 50. Now, what we can't do is just click in here and type something in. What we could do is right-click and actually enter something called the field calculator, and it'll warn you like, hey, you won't be able to undo this. And we could type something in here. The problem is it'll do that, and it'll say, oh, wait a second, you can't do this. And it has a problem because we're actually trying to put text in, so we have to surround it in quotes. Now, obviously, that's a problem because it puts that text in for every single one. So I'm going to undo this real quick and run a blanket out. What we want is to do provinces starting with A and fill those in, provinces starting with B, fill those in, etc. So what we want to do is start what's called an editing session. So you want to right-click the blank part of the toolbar here and turn on the editor bar. And this editor bar has a bunch of tools, but you can't enable any of them until you say Start Editing. And what you want to make sure is that your target is correct in this box here. If it was something else, we would have a problem. Now, let me stop this and start again. You'll notice that if you have multiple layers from multiple folders, which I'll add just to illustrate here. Let's see, we'll add a layer in here. You won't even see it show up, but if we start editing, it'll ask us, hey, what layer you want to edit? And you want to make sure you select the source location of the data you actually want to edit. But now that we're in an editing session, we can actually just type in here whatever we want. So we could say starting with A. And you can, highlight things, copy them, paste them, copy, paste. You can do things like paste in and then just change something, etc. It's just like working with any text field at all. I just did that by accident with a keystroke, so we'll clear that out. And for this case, because it's an easy example, it's pretty straightforward. But you might get to a situation where, for instance, let's say you've got all kinds. The field here is not alphabetized right, and you can actually alphabetize it by right-clicking and saying sort ascending, or you could reverse alphabetize it like that. So there are a lot of tools in here, and it's worth kind of messing around a little bit if you have time. And then starting with something else, right? And for instance, you can still use that calculator we were messing around with before by selecting everything and then going to right-click and field calculator and entering in, starting with something else. So you'll notice there's a checkbox there, calculate selected records only, and that'll just fill in the selected records. So we've filled in our legend here. Obviously it's nonsensical because who cares what letter it starts with, the province name start with. But when you're done, you want to make sure that you go to stop editing, and it'll ask you to save edits, and you want to make sure you do. But now, and I'll remove this because we don't need it anymore. But now, instead of having this kind of kludgy multiple values in a category, we can just go down here to starting and click Add All Values, and we have a good legend and a good map right off the bat, right? The nice thing here is if we did the other method where we use province name and added things together and group them, I'm just going to shorthand this, but I'll have it say A, right, and then we'll just merge A and B, and then everything else will be grouped into other. Let's say that I decide to remove this. So here's my layer, and I decide, oops, I delete it by accident, and I got to add back in the France layer, the provinces layer. I've just lost all my work. I have to go back in and recategorize everything in province name, group them together, retype stuff in, whereas if I go to this variable that I created, everything is done with a couple clicks of the button. So anyway, that's a brief introduction to editing attributes. Do so with care, but don't be afraid of it. And one good strategy is to make sure you have a backup copy of your unmanipulated data from the beginning. But anyway, good luck, and if you have any questions, let me know.